विकास रंजन सर का नाम आपने टॉपर्स की जुबान से कई बार सुना होगा।
विकास रंजन सर,
विकास रंजन सर,
विकास रंजन पॉइंट ऑफ
विकास रंजन सर की विकास रंजन सर की
विकास सर
From Vikas Ranjan, I
विकास रंजन सर फॉर गिविंग मी डायरेक्शन।
उनकी सोशियोलॉजी गाइडेंस ने अनेक यूपीएससी एस्पिरेंट्स के सपनों को हकीकत में बदला है। अभी तक चाहे बात हो ऑफलाइन क्लासेस या रिकॉर्डेड सेशन की, उन्होंने हर फॉर्मेट में एक्सीलेंस डिलीवर किया है और इसी वजह से कई टॉपर्स उनके स्टूडेंट्स रहे हैं। लेकिन अब वक्त है एक नए चैप्टर का। स्टूडेंट्स की लगातार डिमांड को ध्यान में रखते हुए ट्रायम्फ आईएएस पहली बार लेकर आ रहा है एक एक्सक्लूसिव लाइव बैच, सोशियो लाइफ ऑनलाइन टैबलेट कोर्स। ये बैच होगा पूरी तरह से लाइव। यहाँ मिलेगा आपको डेली रियल टाइम इंटरेक्शन और विकास सर से डायरेक्ट मेंटरशिप। चाहे आप फ्रेशर हो या एक्सपीरियंस्ड एस्पिरेंट, ये बैच आपकी प्रिपरेशन में एक नई जान डाल सकता है और एक सच्चा गेम चेंजर हो सकता है। ज्यादा जानकारी के लिए तुरंत विजिट करें ट्रायम्फ आईएएस वेबसाइट और नीचे दिए गए नंबर पर कॉल करें। डोंट वेट नाउ, लेट्स गो लाइव विथ सोशियो लाइफ ऑनलाइन टैबलेट कोर्स।
Hi, I am Dr. Rangamanju. I have secured All India Rank 24 in the recently concluded UPSC CSE 2024. I am essentially a medical graduate. I graduated from Bangalore Medical College in the year 2019. This was my 6th attempt at the examination and I have so far given 3 mains. I secured a score of 139 in my essay in the recently concluded exam, and prior to this, in the previous 2 mains, I scored approximately 115 in each of those papers. So this segment I would like to cover what may have helped me in crossing that 120 in an essay and what potentially I may have used in getting there. So I'm usually asked what is my core strategy that went against the traditional essay format. So I have uploaded a good number of my essays on my Telegram channel, the link to which will be attached to this video. You will find that in my earlier essays, they were a lot more free flowing, in that it seemed like I was having a conversation between me and the reader. There are some who claim that the essay must always be written in the passive voice and not in the active voice, or that the essay must have a typical structure in that it must have multiple segments and so on and so forth. So I think after this leg of the examination, with the many mistakes that I made and all the other things that I included in this essay, I would say that there is no such compulsion that the UPSC places on what constitutes a good essay, and therefore the parameters on which they are weighed possibly do not have to conform to a strict structure. And by this I mean that perhaps we should always have an introduction, a body and a conclusion, but beyond this I do not think that UPSC prescribes a certain format. Now if I may exemplify this in my own case with what I have done in this year's examination, I picked 2 essays which in my opinion were less likely to be picked by the others, and of course most importantly they were essays on which I could have written sufficiently well on. So my first essay was Forests Precede Civilization and Deserts Follow Them, and my essay in section B was All Ideas Having Large Consequences Are Always Simple. Now if you may peruse this year's essay paper, you will find that there were some thematic essays and some philosophical essays. I have always believed that philosophy and its adjuncts are my strength. So even when I picked an essay such as the Forests Precede Civilization and Deserts Follow Them, I chose to take a philosophical line. For instance, in my very introductory passage, I had what was my central core message and my lesson from this essay topic, which was that human beings necessarily have a tendency to destroying the environment around them, that being one, and the second being perhaps that there is a sense of infinite greed and that may devour resources in the climb towards civilization. Now I would highly recommend that anybody attempting these essays pick a philosophical over a thematic should they have sufficient content over them. Now this was among the strategies that I did this year, and to follow what was the start to my essay, whether I used any quotes or what was essentially something that could distinguish my essay from the rest. This is something that I practiced especially for this year, and this again played on my strengths. Now I do a lot of poetry writing as a hobby in my free time, and I decided to invest the expertise that I already have and induct it into the essay writing practice. So what I did was I constructed an essay on the spot as an introduction as well as a conclusion. In fact, in some of my practice essays, I had a middling poem as well in order to put into my essay. Now, because I had some experience with poetry writing, this came naturally to me and I could do it with some self-assurance. In fact, if I may recall, I only know the rhyming words for what I used in this year's essay. In that, I think I rhymed greed, indeed, with breed and seed, and I constructed sentences around them. Now, this may have come to me naturally, but this I thought is something that will distinguish my essay from the others. Having said that, there are some who suggest that an essay must have a story at the very start to grab the examiner's attention, or a poem, or perhaps a quotation from a book. I don't think that UPSC necessarily rewards anyone who prescribes to such monotonous adherence to what we think are standards that we must comply by. And did I challenge the conventional views in an essay, and how did I make it sound more balanced? Now, for this I would like to use the example of what I used in my second essay, which is that all ideas having large consequences are always simple. I believed, and maybe UPSC perhaps sees this as well, that the pestle approach that is usually followed by candidates, the usage of political, economic, scientific, technological and these sort of dimensions, has the possibility of being aped and mimicked by many such candidates across papers, and perhaps on that count it may not stand out as much. And especially if you betray to the examiner that there is such a pestle approach in your thinking, they may think that the natural essay writing style, etc., may not have been fully incorporated. So what was one of the things that I challenged, which is generally accepted as convention for the purpose of UPSC essays? Some people believe that the pestle approach and the staple approach, that is the dimensions along political, scientific, technological, economic, etc., are considered to be time tested. Now, I don't necessarily agree with them, and what I did was adopt a multidimensional approach. I used tenets of perhaps mathematics, music, art and literature in order to corroborate the same. For instance, in the second essay that I wrote, which was on all ideas having large consequences are always simple, I used the idea of infinity and the summation of infinity that equates minus 1 by 12, which confounds the average mind. And I also used Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I used elements of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. It was a poem. Now, I used all these ideas in order to extrapolate what I was trying to say in this essay. There is a word of caution that I could sound here. In the process of doing so, if it seemed like it was an extreme hard fit, I may have been marked negatively for this. But should I have been able to convey my ideas in a simplified manner, I think I would have won over the examiner. And I think this may have been to my benefit in this year's CSE examination as well. Another element of the essay that I think some people do not necessarily pay attention to is the fact that simplicity is key. Again, if I were to use my examples in my previous essays, you will find that there was a lot of complicated language that I used in order to incorporate more difficult vocabulary. I thought that this was going to earn me a premium in terms of scores. And I figured out after my 2 failed attempts at the essay, I would say that vocabulary is not necessarily rewarded, nor is a strict adherence to grammar. Now, of course, we shouldn't make very silly errors, but I know a good number of my friends who, despite making some simple grammatical errors, have scored sufficiently well in this leg of the essay examination. Now, having said that and having covered all this, I am usually asked what is one of the X factors in my essay. So, instead of saying what it is, I will answer this in the negative. I will say without a semblance of a doubt that there is no premium awarded to vocabulary. That is, fancy English is not in any way, I think, being rewarded. What instead works is simplicity. Now, despite my Abhyas essay, which I think will be seen by a lot of you, having a sufficiently high score, I changed in the final day of the examination process. I had a more natural flow to my essay. That is because I had only 3 headings throughout my essay, And secondly, I used simple sentences, the sentences that could have been perhaps understood by a 10th standard student reading the essay just once. My intention with this is to ensure that the examiner does not necessarily stress their mind in trying to understand in a complicated way what I was trying to put out. In fact, I think simplicity is so much so the key that it is to the credit of the writer if he can convey the most complex of ideas in the simplest sense. So, I would again emphasize as much as possible on simplicity being the hallmark of a good essay strategy. This necessarily meant that in my case I would always use long drawn out lines to convey a message, and by paragraphs actually would be only 1 or 2 lines long. I cut all this short, and I ensured that I would keep it simple. Another thing that I would say is something that people do not perhaps follow, that we have a tendency to show our essay copies to people within the UPSC realm, within the UPSC universe, some self-acclaimed UPSC essay greats. They sell courses online. I feel like that because they have a standard template, anybody who subscribes to a single template will have their flaws clearly shown out in the final essay paper. So, what I did was I went back to my biology teacher from 12th grade, and she was a good writer herself, and I showed my essays to her. I sought the feedback from my teacher, and I found that some of her commentary, some of the mistakes that she rectified in me were a lot more actionable, and they clearly made more sense in that I was then appealing to an average reader and not necessarily someone who was trying to employ all techniques in the UPSC universe. So, if I were to distill my essay writing strategy to these simple ideas, it would be to keep it clean, keep it multidimensional, and ensure that the reader has no difficulty in understanding what is being conveyed, and if possible not to include those usually quoted greats such as Gandhiji, Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose or Kalam sir, and so on. I will have attached my Telegram channel handle to this page, and thank you.